Hello, my leadership friends. Today we're going to talk about real estate beyond location, because where you live is a leadership decision, and we want to make great leadership investment decisions. And by that, I mean LIDs, leadership investment decisions to improve our quality of life and the quality of the life of our community where we live. Sam Zell, Donald Shoup, and why where you live is a leadership decision. Welcome home, my leadership friends. Today we're talking about real estate, not as speculation, not as status, and definitely not as dinner party bragging rights. And I have said in previous episodes, at times I've owned big real estate, like a flip house that I flipped that had an indoor basketball court, and all of the LP siding on the outside of it had to be replaced, and it was 7 levels of house. And I also bought a house. The first house I bought was in a very rough part of Portland where my family said, you cannot live there. And I heeded their advice when I had a baby on the way, and they loaded up somebody who'd been shot right in front of the house while my mom was visiting. Anyway, we're talking about real estate as structure for families, structures for wealth, and structure for how communities that actually work on their real estate. Because where you live is not just a lifestyle choice, although it can be that too. It's a leadership decision, and something that's a bit on my mind lately today is it's a privilege to own real estate. I feel very privileged to own it, and many of us do not own it, and some of us want to own it, and some of us can barely afford it. And if you're a politician or a leader and you're just adding tax upon tax, driving out 25-year-olds and single mothers and the unemployed veterans that are trying to hang on to their home by a string with some levy on something that doesn't actually provide extra value and creates a tax deficit, I'm not sure that's good leadership. In fact, I don't think it is. Maybe I need some feedback on that and understanding, but it seems like every time I look, there's a new levy about something, and sometimes people levy something and then they don't even follow through with it, like Westland when they levied for a pool. We don't want taxes on something that could create wealth for almost all Americans, and that's real estate, as long as you don't tax the snot out of it. So who is Sam Zell? Let's anchor this with somebody worth listening to. Sam Zell. Sam Zell was one of the greatest real estate investors in history. Apartments, offices, distressed properties, billions of dollars. His nickname wasn't so positive, though. It was the Grave Dancer. And it's not subtle, right? He went into some really distressed properties and brought them back, but he bought assets when everyone else thought they were dead, hence the name. Zell was funny, blunt, and allergic to hype. And he was obsessed with one thing leaders should care about deeply: making decisions that still work even when you're wrong. So that's one of the things that you can do with structure, right? Is even if you're wrong, you can come out of it okay. And one of his most famous ideas, loosely paraphrased, goes like this: when everyone feels smart, I slow down. When everyone feels scared, I lean in. Because sometimes the value is there when people are scared, right? Buy the dip. The mindset applies perfectly to buying a home and sometimes buying stocks. Zell's principle: location is optionality, not prestige. So he was forward thinking. He didn't buy locations to impress you or impress people. He bought locations that gave him options in the future options. For couples buying or downsizing in Walla Walla or Los Angeles or New York City, that matters more than ever. Being close to downtown isn't about being trendy necessarily. It's about walkability, bike access, aging in place, access to healthcare, easier resale, and easier life changes. A home near services works longer than a home that requires a car for everything, right? And we see this everywhere. In Seattle and New York, walkable neighborhoods hold value across cycles. And in Dallas, they have some sprawly kind of things going on because land was cheap. And in Dallas, nodes of density outperform sprawl. In Miami and Los Angeles, proximity beats square footage every time in terms of value, right? So the leadership translation is wise leaders choose positions that expand future options, not just present comfort. Or as Proverbs puts it, the prudent see danger and take refuge. So Zell principle number 2, follow durable demand, not emotion. Zell trusted boring things like jobs, infrastructure, human behavior, not vibes and trends and trendy. Some of us in Portland used to talk about trendy third, where it was very expensive and the future was hard to see how you could come out of it at times with the real estate values just going up and up and up. And it's not what your cousin says is about to blow up, right? It's not about impressing people at the dinner table. For families and retirees, the questions are pretty simple. If driving becomes harder, does life still work? If income shifts, is this house still flexible for you? Would someone else want this home in a colder market? And I'm not perfect in this. I did pretty well in my first few homes, and I got kind of burned on one of my fourth ones. You have to be careful if you're taking on something big. I took on something that a guy who had money that he made working for Oracle decided he wanted to sell, and I didn't take a clue from that. But anyway, think about durable demand. And Walla Walla actually has that. It has compact downtown area, medical access, schools, parks, the same forces that prop up value in Seattle, Manhattan, and Miami, right? Here's the truth of it all. Buying only on emotion is like marrying somebody because they laugh at your jokes. I actually do like it that my wife laughs at my jokes, but it's helpful, but it's not sufficient in terms of thinking about leadership investment decisions. On to Zell principle number 3, a margin of safety beats perfect timing. I hear people talk about this in other places too, where if you're looking to bid on something and every time you bid, you get the property, you're probably bidding too high, right? You need to build in those contingencies for forgiveness in deals. And you need to have a strategy where you might have to bid 20 times to get one deal. That's what the real estate people do. And be patient. And you do get fatigue if you try and solve all your real estate needs in one weekend. And your realtor may actually even help you to do that by showing you something high price, low price, and something just right at the end when you're tired. So watch out for that and really dig into those deep values for those of us that follow this podcast anyway. Let's work a little harder and make those investment decisions so that we can actually help our communities. And sometimes that means maybe not buying such a big house that you can't afford it and you can't afford to go do things in the evening that help your community. For homeowners, it may look a little different. It might look like this. Don't max out your payments. Choose layouts that can adapt. Rent if needed. People at the Department of Energy in Oregon, we used to talk about this quite a bit, that the value of renting something is really huge. For example, you don't get hit with the tax assessment. It's spread across all of the renters instead of just one guy in his home having to pay for a levy that somebody that has a master's degree just figured out would be a great one to levy on you. Anyway, your house, your family can change with time, right? So for multifamily investors, this is where leadership becomes civic service, right? Instead of endless sprawl and endlessly expensive infrastructure, what about increasing densities with ADUs and places that you can live? The Zell style thinking says increase density where services already exist. Go vertical thoughtfully, add housing without exploding municipal costs. And that should happen in most central business districts where all the business activity happens, right? And that's leadership investing too. It's not extraction. And it reminds of Luke 14 because Luke 14 says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the costs, right? What are the costs? I think Zell would approve of that. A quick but important add-on to this podcast for me is Donald Shoup died last year, and he was the king of parking realities. And he was a UCLA professor, I believe. And we can't talk about livability without mentioning Donald Shoup. Again, I think he was a UCLA professor, and he stood behind what is called the Shoupista movement. His big idea was simple and wildly misunderstood. Free parking is not free. So leaders want to come up with free parking. Everybody's frustrated by parking. That's a fact. it doesn't matter how good the parking is, and people are still frustrated by it, right? And it's one of those things that you kind of stuff down, like you had to go around the block 5 times today, but nobody wants to hear about that. So you kind of stuff it away. But when you get into a leadership position, you think, now I'm going to resolve this parking problem. But leaders should understand first, mandatory parking requirements quietly make housing more expensive. Every required parking space adds costs, spreads buildings apart, and kills that density that we were talking about, and kills walkability too. Second, when parking reflects real demand instead of ideology, cities become more walkable, more affordable, and more human. You might see your neighbor on the way to somewhere if you could walk to somewhere as opposed to having to drive. This is an anti-car heresy, but in UCLA, it's sort of a joke, right? LA story when Steve Martin drove 2 houses down, because that's what you do in LA. You drive everywhere. But the pro reality here for people that are pro leaders is a walkable neighborhood works to walk and get around to age well. I think that's why Zell loved proximity. That's why Shoup talks about parking. Same truth, just different angles, right? Why this matters to you, because a home is not just a shelter. It provides structure for family and family rhythms. It creates wealth over time, something that the renter often misses out on. And so we need to think about that too. And livability that affects stress, health, and connection with others. When leaders think beyond their own lines and consider community outcomes, I think density and walkability and infrastructure make a lot of sense. And when you structure your life, structure your real estate decisions so you can make leadership investment decisions that bless more than just ourselves. So you have a little margin. And that's good economics, and that's good leadership. And frankly, that's stewardship. When we take care of the land, we're talking about real estate, right? Practical tool. Before buying or investing, ask 3 questions. Does the location expand our future options? Is demand here durable and not emotional? Number 2. And does choice strengthen the community, not just our balance sheet? If the answer is yes twice, you're probably doing pretty wise decision making and better leadership investment decisions than others. 3 times and you're really leading. Real estate is one of the few places where private decisions and public decisions shape life. When we choose wisely, we don't just build wealth, we build communities worth living in. Empower your leadership and elevate your image with God in mind. Bless your week.